Chapter 3. On the bridge, Greta examined the forward EXT screen. There were no stars. Space everywhere was filled with a light as gray and as dull as that of a false dawn on Earth. In the gray glow, at a distance as yet undetermined, were a number of spheres. They looked small, but if they were as large as the one immediately after the Sleipnir, they were huge. The sphere behind them, estimated to be at a distance of 50 kilometers, was about the size of Earth's moon, relative to the ship. Its surface was as smooth and as gray as a ball of lead. Darrell spoke a code into a wrist console, and the sphere on the star screen seemed to shoot towards them. It filled the screen until Darrell changed the line of sight. They were looking at about 20 degrees of arc of the limb of the sphere.
"There it is,"
Darrell said. A small object floated around the edge of the sphere and seemed to shoot towards them. She magnified it, and it became a small gray sphere.
"It orbits round the big one,"
she said. Darrell paused, then said,
"We, the ship, came out of that small sphere. Out of it. Through its skin."
"You mean we had been inside it?" Greta said.
"And now we're outside of it." "Yes, sir. Exactly."
She gasped and said,
Oh, sir!"
Around the large sphere, slightly above the plane of the orbit of the small sphere, but within its sweep in an inner orbit, sped another object. At least 15 times as large as the small globe, it caught up with the globe, and the two disappeared together around the curve of the primary.
"Wellington's body,"
Greta said. He turned away from the screen, took one step, and turned around again.
"It's not right. She should be trailing along behind us, or at least parallel with us, maybe shooting off at an angle, but still moving in our direction. But she's been grabbed by the big sphere. She's in orbit, and her size, gargantuan. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be." "Nothing should," Wong said.
"Take us back," Greta said. "Establish an orbit around the primary, on the same plane as the secondary, but further out, approximately 1.5 kilometers from it." Darrell's expression said, "Then what?" Greta wondered if she had the same thought as he. The faces of the others on the bridge were doubtful. The fear was covered, but leaking out. He could smell the rotten bubbles. Had they guessed too? "What attraction does the primary have on the ship?" he said to Wong.
"No detectable influence whatsoever, sir. The Sleipnir seems to have a neutral charge, neither positive nor negative, in relation to any of the spheres. Or to Wellington's body."
Greta was slightly relieved. His thoughts had been so wild that he had not been able to consider them as anything but hysterical fantasies. But Wong's answer showed that Greta's idea was also his. Instead of replying in terms of gravitational force, he had talked as if the ship were a subatomic particle. But if the ship was not affected by the primary, why had Wellington's corpse been attracted by the primary? "Our velocity in relation to the primary," Greta said.
"We cut off the acceleration as soon as the wires were reconnected," Wong said. "This was immediately after we came out into this space. We didn't apply any retrodrive. Our velocity, as indicated by power consumption, is 10 megaparsecs per minute. That is," he added after a pause, "what the instruments show. But our detector, which should be totally ineffective at this velocity, indicates 50 kilometers per minute, relative to the big sphere."
Wong leaned back in his chair, as if he expected Greta to explode into incredulity. Greta lit up another cigar. This time, his hand shook. He blew out a big puff of smoke and said, "Obviously, we're operating under different, quote, laws, unquote, out here." Wong sighed softly.
"So, you think so too, Captain?"
"Yes.
different laws, which means that every time we make a move through this space, we can't know what the result will be. May I ask what you plan to do, sir?
By this question, which Wang would never have dared to voice before, though he had doubtless often thought it, Greta knew that the navigator shared his anxiety. Beneath that apparently easy manner and soft voice was a pain just beneath the navel. The umbilical had been ripped out. Wang was hurting and bleeding inside. Was he, too, beginning to float away in a gray void, bereft as no man had ever been bereft? It took a special type of man or woman to lose himself from Earth, or his native planet, to go out among the stars so far that the natal sun was not even a faint glimmer. It also took special conditioning for the special type of man. He had to believe, in the deepest part of his unconscious, that his ship was a piece of Mother Earth. He had to believe, otherwise he went to pieces. It could be done. Hundreds did it. But nothing had prepared even these farfarers for absolute divorce from the universe itself. Greta ached with the dread of the void. The void was coiling up inside him, a gray serpent, a slither of nothingness, coiling. And what would happen when it uncoiled? And what would happen to the crew when they were informed, as they must be, of the utter dissociation? There was only one way to keep their minds from slipping into moorings. They must believe that they could get back into the world, just as he must believe it.
I'll play it by ear,
Greta said.
What, sir?
Play it by ear, Greta said, more harshly than he had intended. I was merely answering your question. Have you forgotten you asked me what I meant to do?
Oh, no, sir,
Wang said.
I was just thinking.
Keep your mind on the job, Greta said. He told Darl he would take over. He spoke the code to activate the all stations. A low, rising, falling sound went into every room of the Sleipnir, and all screens flashed a black and green checked pattern. Then the warnings, visual and audible, died out, and the captain spoke. He talked for 2 minutes. The bridgemen looked as if the lights had been turned off in their brains. It was almost impossible to grasp the concept of their being outside their universe. As difficult was thinking of their unimaginably vast native cosmos as only an electron orbiting around the nucleus of an atom. If what the captain said was true, how could it be? The ship was in the space between the superatoms of a supermolecule of a super-universe. Even though they knew that the Sleipnir had ballooned under the effect of nearly 300,000 times the speed of light, they could not wrap the fingers of their minds around the concept. It turned to smoke and drifted away. It took 10 minutes, ship's time, to turn and to complete the maneuvers which placed the Sleipnir in an orbit parallel to, but outside the secondary, or, as Greta thought of it, our universe. He gave his chair back to Darl and paced back and forth across the bridge while he watched the star screen. If they were experiencing the sundering, the cutting off, they were keeping it under control. They had been told by their captain that they were going back in, not that they would make a try at re-entry. They had been through much with him, and he had never failed them. With this trust, they could endure the agony of dissolution. As the Sleipnir established itself parallel to the secondary, Wellington's body curved around the primary again and began to pass the small sphere in the ship. The arms of the mountainous body were extended stiffly to both sides, and her legs spread out. In the gray light, her skin was bluish-black from the ruptured veins and arteries below the skin. Her red hair, coiled in a psyche knot, looked black. Her eyes, each of which was larger than the bridge of the Sleipnir, were open, bulging clots of black blood. Her lips were pulled back in a grimace. The teeth, like a soot-streaked portcullis. Cartwheeling, she passed the sphere and the ship. Wong reported that there were 3 shadows on the surface of the primary. Those were keeping pace with the secondary, the corpse, and the ship. Magnified on the bridge bulkhead screen, each shadow was a silhouette of one of the 3 orbiting bodies. The shadows were only about 1 shade darker than the surface, and were caused by a shifting pucker in the primary skin. The surface protruded along the edges of the shadows and formed a shallow depression within the edges. If the shadow of the Sleipnir was a true indication of the shape of the vessel, the Sleipnir had lost its needle shape and was a spindle, fat at both ends and narrow-waisted. When Wellington's corpse passed by the small sphere in the ship, her shadow, or print, reversed itself in shape. Where the head of the shadow should have been, the feet now were, and vice versa. She disappeared around the curve of the primary, and, on returning on the other side, her shadow had again become a true reflection. It remained so until she passed the secondary, after which the shadow once more reversed itself. Greta had been informed that there seemed to be absolutely no matter in the space outside the spheres. There was not one detectable atom or particle. Moreover, despite the lack of any radiation, the temperature of the hull, and 10 meters beyond the hull, was a fluctuating 52.22 degrees, plus or minus 2.22 degrees Celsius.